Are you interested in effortlessly growing your Bitcoin portfolio? I sure am. The Bitcoin credit card by Gemini earns you Bitcoin back on every purchase. Use it like any credit card. Buy lunch, gas, or your weekly groceries, and you'll earn up to 4% back instantly in Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos straight to your account. All that with no annual fee. And right now, you can grab a $200 Bitcoin welcome bonus. It's the easiest way to start building your Bitcoin stack. Go to Gemini.com/card to learn more. Terms apply. See the link in the description for more information regarding rates and fees.
A warmer for the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in a few minutes by one of our good friends, Blake Lovell. He does such amazing work over at Southeastern 16. We're going to be chatting with him a little bit of what we've seen with Kentucky over the last few days as they are currently dealing with Jalen Quanten's dealing with an injury, but at the same time, their international man of mystery, he is going to be eligible and he is all going to be good to go as, hopefully I say this name correctly, Andrela Jelovic. He is a 6'11" big man that comes in from overseas. He got clearance that he is going to be eligible for this upcoming season by the NCAA, so that's a good sign there. We're going to talk a little bit about Georgia, some of their upside, Arkansas as well, and then we do have to talk about the Tarleton State situation. We did this before I got the news that Billy Gillispie has actually been reinstated by Tarleton State. Like, we were talking about the interim coaching situation. We're going to talk a little bit about Tarleton State. We're going to be talking a little bit about the WAC, but Tarleton State reinstated Billy Gillispie late on Monday, which I find that to be very intriguing, to say the least. So we're going to be having that chat with Blake, and with Billy Gillispie, he's already stepped away for health concerns, so might be a little bit of forward looking there, but certainly some good, clean family fun on that front. And we are going to try to get you guys set for what is going to be an amazing college basketball season. We've already got all but 3 conference previews up for this podcast. So have the Big East, the Big Ten, and the SEC to do. And Blake, he typically joins me for the SEC preview podcast. We'll probably do that one in a week or two, so be on the lookout there. If you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, LRCM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via the 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, everything is powered by EdgeBoost. Over at EdgeBoost, they're making sure that bettors are able to have access to their funds whenever and wherever. With EdgeBoost, 100% of gambling transactions do get approved. And when you go to EdgeBoost.bet, put in that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That'll get you a $1 match on your first deposit up to $25. Now let's chat it up with Blake, who's doing such amazing work, taking a look at the Southeastern Conference over at Southeastern 16, but really does a great job on so many fronts with college basketball. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell. Last name is spelled Lovell. And Blake, always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Thanks as always for having me, Greg.
Always a pleasure. And Blake, it has been a very wild last few weeks of college basketball because typically you see like 1 or 2 coaching moves that happen in like August through October, and this offseason we now have 5 with Billy Gillispie being put on leave by Tarleton State. And just what do you make out of that entire ordeal? Because I was stunned that they brought him back to start with, to start the 2024-25 season, because the interim coaching regime had done such a good job the previous year, and now they put themselves in a very, very big bind, and it's going to be interesting to see how they operate for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, like it was just one of those when they hired him, already it just sort of came out of nowhere, because I mean, the guy hadn't coached in almost a decade in terms of being the head coach at that, at this type of a level. And so it was something that I think was a pretty big surprise. Again, you go back before that, what is Texas Tech in 2012, which we know that did not end well there. And so it was a surprising one. And you just brought up, like, I had to remember, I'm like, oh yeah, he's been there 5 full seasons now. It's about to be in his 6th season, which was going to be a bit of a surprise. They had the success a couple of years ago, obviously, very good team and such, but I mean, you mentioned it, kind of something where, look, this time of year when you have these kind of changes, it does no one any favors. Obviously, again, the reason behind this certainly does not seem to be too great. And then, of course, what it means for the players on the team now and all those things. And so, yeah, it's obviously not a great situation. And, I mean, we talk about too, right? Just I can remember many years ago when we were talking about the WAC, and you think about just how much the conference has changed since then. And so when you have this kind of move and you're looking at, again, a pretty not so great situation, not good for anyone, it seems.
Yep, and it's going to be interesting to see what we get out of Glenn Cyprien. He's going to be the acting head coach for right now with Tarleton State, having everything happening with Billy Gillispie. And I don't know if you have any familiarity with him, but I know that he's been around the block. He's been at a few stops with Billy Gillispie, and it's going to be interesting to see if he runs the same style, because with Gillespie's teams, we all know that with Tarleton State, they were always very notorious for generating turnovers, playing rough and tumble defense, and not having a lot of shooting. And that's a style that I think is very distinct to him, and I think that might be hard to duplicate.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Is anytime you see this kind of move, it's hard to know exactly what changes are going to be made, because you mentioned, I mean, here's someone who's stepping into this role who's really been a lot of places. I mean, this is not someone who's just coming in and doesn't have any familiarity in this kind of scenario. And so I think, yeah, it is something where, you certainly look at, this sort of situation and feel like, again, how do you make the best of it, right? And I think that's kind of what it comes down to is what do you do to try to make the best of what is going on. And like I said, I think when you sort of look at the situation, in terms of this was a program that was kind of trying to regain its footing after, again, coming off of a really successful season a couple of years ago, took a step back last year again, and it's just trying to rebuild that momentum. And as always, right, you're looking at a roster where you're going to have some new faces and you're trying to figure out exactly how you put it all together. So, yeah, it's certainly not an easy situation to be stepping into, but, coaching wise in terms of style and that sort of thing, I think it's always kind of up for debate as to what will a new coach, even if he has familiarity with the head coach, there are obviously, Greg, going to be some things that he's probably going to look at and say, we probably shouldn't have been doing that as much, or we did not succeed in those areas. We need to try to change it here a little bit and try to sort of make it his own.
Yep, I think that is going to be such an interesting team to be taking a look at moving forward, because out there in the WAC as well, you mentioned it is a conference that looks quite a bit different, and there's a team that plays a very similar style to Abilene Christian, and I feel just a lot more bullish about them and Utah Valley moving forward. I know that you've joined me actually in past years to preview the WAC, and I want to get your thoughts on this conference, because there's only 7 teams that are going to be in there, so they're going to be playing each other 3 times, and when it comes to this conference, you've got teams out there in Utah, you've got like half the conference now in Texas, so I think that's just such an interesting ordeal, with, in my opinion, Abilene Christian and Utah Valley being those 2 teams to beat.
Yeah, they seem to be the top of the list there, and again, when you're just comparing changing face of this conference, who knows, right? I mean, it's like you just don't know from year to year exactly what this is going to look like. Now you've got such a sort of, unique setup in terms of the way the conference schedule is going to work, and again, just the number of teams. We're just not used to that, especially in a conference where, a decade ago, where we're talking about, looking up and feeling like, hey, they still didn't have a lot of teams, but you still had, right, the New Mexico states. And obviously, teams like that, Grand Canyon was doing what they were doing. And so now I think, you kind of look up and you're trying to figure out exactly what does this conference become. You mentioned, location wise, it's all spread out. And so for me, you mentioned Abilene Christian, I think certainly is a team that I feel like has a chance to be pretty successful there this season. And with Utah Valley, another team that I think, you're kind of looking up and feeling like it's a new roster. There's a lot of new faces, but at the same time, they're coming off of a really good season, as we know. And so it seems to be those 2 will probably lead the way in this conference, but it's always the same. Good luck trying to exactly figure out how this will go, just because of all the sort of unique variables that maybe seemingly only exist in this version of the WAC.
No question about it. It is going to be such an interesting conference to be taking a look at, as Blake Lovell, who does great work over at Southeastern 16, is going to be right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And especially in the wake of the news that Billy Gillispie is now going to be back with Tarleton State, and they did get reinstated. How about if we dive in on the conference of Blake's specialty the most, the SEC? We've got some intrigue with Georgia, Arkansas, a few other teams. We're going to be talking about that and so much more. And can the SEC duplicate the amount of teams that they got into the NCAA tournament last year? We're going to be chatting about that and so much more on the flip side here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast. back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Blake Lovell. He does such great work over at Southeastern 16, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Follow him on the old Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell. Last name it's spelled Lovell. And Blake, how about if we now take a look at your main conference of specialty, the reason why they employ you over at Southeastern 16, the SEC. We did see some news on Monday, and I'm going to hopefully get this name correct. Andrea Jelovich, he is going to be eligible for Kentucky, 6'11", do-it-all sort of combo player, and I want to get your thoughts on what this does mean for Kentucky, because as we know with Kentucky, they do bring back a lot of that backcourt. They're going to be bringing back a lot of the guys that were able to be so successful out there. They do lose Kobe Bryant, who was a really good three-point shooter, but you still have a lot of those pieces. That said, with bringing in a guy like Jelovich, it does bring them a lot more versatility, and hopefully helps out a team that, if there was a weak point for Kentucky last year, it was certainly on the glass and with regards to overall size.
Yeah, and I think with Kentucky, what stands out the most is that you could probably, and we tried to do this exercise in terms of ranking our SEC front courts and back courts, and I think Kentucky is going to be, one of those few teams that really has a claim for both, and to feel like they should probably be in that top tier in both areas, and that's why I think when you look at it overall, Kentucky could wind up being the deepest team, not just in the SEC. They could be top 5 in the country. In terms of depth, if you have guys that sort of play out this way, right? When you look at the depth that they have at guard, look at the depth they have just with the front court. And that's where, you talk about someone like this, one of the top European prospects coming in, 6'11". But we know the wild card in this whole thing is that you have a 6'11" freshman in Malachi Moreno. And then, you have what are probably going to be your projected starters on day one in terms of Mo Diabate, Brandon Garrison. But it's like, I still think sometimes, and Kentucky fans don't get me wrong, we know they're not forgetting about this guy. But it's like, because we don't know the exact timeline for Jaden Quaintance, we're looking at this and thinking, man, if they're going to have all those guys as options in terms of their front court play, they should be a better rebounding team. They should be a team that can sort of really attack you on both sides of the floor. And so I think this overall combination of guys that they have, you've got some experience, you've got, some new guys to the field here. And I think that's what's going to help Kentucky be pretty successful, because once Quaintance is back, if he's the player that we think he can be and know we have seen him be, I think he's going to be one of the best players on the team and could be one of the best big men in the entire SEC, period. To have, I think, the depth that they have available, that is going to be something I think Mark Pope can lean on, just because when you look at the way they want to play, and we know kind of the tempo they want to try to play with, I don't know how this team shooting-wise will maybe compare to last year's team. I think they'll get to the free throw line a lot more. So it's going to be kind of a give and take a little bit, maybe compared to last year's team. But I think it's a very talented roster, very deep roster. And I think, again, it's why Kentucky, for me, probably is one of those preseason top 10 type teams. Or if you want to say they're not at the start, they certainly feel like it once they get Quaintance back fully ready to go.
Yep, Quaintance coming back is going to be big, but being able to get the international man of mystery, that's going to be able to help them out as well. That's going to give them a little bit more versatility, and that's going to be a fun team to watch moving forward. And we've had you on this podcast a lot, and we've talked a lot about these SEC teams, Blake. I haven't talked to you too much about Arkansas, though, which I find to be very interesting, because you've got John Calipari, you've got all the Tyson money, and you've actually got some guys that returned from a season ago, especially DJ Wagner, who obviously was one of those guys over at Kentucky under John Calipari. He followed him over. How do you take a look at this Arkansas team? One that was, let's call it what it is, very inconsistent last year. Really rough start to the season. They finished things off strong, especially when they got Boogie Flam back for the NCAA tournament. He's obviously out, but now you bring in the likes of a Nick Pringle. You got Trevon Brazil back as well, and I feel like this Arkansas team really found their swagger towards the back half of the season, and I really think that they did a good job of mixing and matching with some new pieces and some of the same old from a year ago.
Yeah, Arkansas is another one of these teams, and I think that you look at them, and sometimes, like, depending on where they're picked in the preseason, I can see Arkansas fans being a little bit like, hey, come on, like, we're more talented than that. But if you actually look at the numbers, it's like, let's understand that this is a team, whether Cal has been there, whether it was the last couple of years of the Muss era, that kind of underachieved in the regular season in the SEC. And so, they've not had a winning record since that 13-5 team in 21-22. And the year before, they went 13-4, 2020 and 21, 2 seasons before that, right? Like, they're losing record in the SEC. And so it's like, it's one of those where we know this is one of the best programs in the SEC whenever everything is cooking. And I think this is the kind of roster where they should get back to that, 12, 13 win type mark in SEC play. They should be a preseason, top 10 to top 15 team. For me, I mentioned DJ Wagner. I think he's someone who kind of gets forgotten about too, maybe in this group, just because all eyes are on these freshmen and just how good Darius Acuff is, how good Malik Thomas is. And it's really, I think, all eyes on the sophomore class too. The guys who were talking about last year, Carter Knox and Billy Richmond. I think if Carter Knox takes the jump, then I think he can. And the way he was playing towards the end of last season, I mean, to me, he is a preseason SEC Player of the Year type candidate. Maybe a little bit more on the sleeper side for some people. But I think he can get there if this team is, again, as good as they should be. I think if you just take that group, that's really good. But Wagner, I mean, we got to remember how many minutes this guy was playing last year. Like, he was very good at Kentucky, and obviously Cal leaned on him a lot there. But you look at just the minutes. He's like, all right, I'm bringing my guy with me, and he's going to play a lot of minutes this year. And he did that last year as one of the top ones in the SEC. So you've got that mix of experience with really your superstar type freshman talent. You've got this rising sophomore group, and that's all in the backcourt. And I think where, again, maybe things are decided for Arkansas this season is going to be that front court trio of Trevin Brazile, Malik Ewan, and Nick Pringle. I think Pringle, the addition of him to me was one of the better kind of under the radar pickups because they needed somebody like that, an experienced guy who's been around the SEC. And now you pair him with Brazile, who, again, has played many years. We know he had the injury situation and such, but there's no one that knows Arkansas better than Trevin Brazile just based on the fact of what he's experienced over these past several years there. And then Ewan comes in, high expectations for him, I think, right off the bat. I think all of that is going to come together and make Arkansas one of the more, intriguing teams in the country probably heading into the season. But at the same time, Greg, I mean, I'm probably going to pick them high like I usually do. For whatever reason, I'm always high on Arkansas going into the season. But I can't lie and be like, is Cal going to be able to put it all together offensively? Because that was the thing we looked at last year. And whether you could say that was the Boogie Fland injury early on or whatever, that's always the thing. And I know they've had good offensive numbers. Don't get me wrong. Like, you can look at their adjusted offensive efficiency and all that, but I still am going to be a little bit hesitant in this era when I look at the way they run their offense, and maybe they're going to be able to evolve pretty well, I would feel like, just playing the skill set of these really, really talented freshmen they have.
And I do think that could cause for this bunch to be a little bit up and down towards the early part of the season. Maybe they've got some volatility early on, but perhaps it's just like last year where they find their swagger in February and March and they play their best basketball towards the back half of the season, like we have seen many, many times from John Calipari teams dating back to his time over at Kentucky. As Blake Lovell does such great work over at Southeastern 16, he's joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And then the other team of intrigue that I really haven't talked to you too much about here in the offseason, that'd be Georgia. And I feel like it's because with Georgia, you really don't have like the super duper star guys. Cannon Catchings, I think, has a lot of upside. He's a former top 50 recruit, just never panned out for him at Purdue, and he was relegated to a small role over at BYU. And then you got Blue Kane, who returns from a season ago, but he's not necessarily a guy that gets a lot of fanfare nationwide. How do you take a look at this Georgia team? Because with Mike White, I still think a lot of people think back to his time at Florida where he didn't necessarily achieve what a lot of people thought that he was going to, and they just automatically think that he's a bad coach. But I feel like he's done a fine job over at Georgia, and he feels like one of those coaches where when more is expected of him, he underachieves. When less is expected of him, he overachieves.
Yeah, great point, because I am probably someone too who does this a lot with Mike White and Georgia specifically, where it's like, I don't know. My guess is they're probably going to be picked somewhere in the bottom four in the SEC. Maybe not. Maybe there's some other teams that'll kind of get that distinction, but I think that Georgia will probably be in there somewhere. But usually, if you look up and kind of realize the way they evolve as a team, 21's last year, 21's the year before. And remember the stuff we're talking about with Georgia in 2022 or whatever. I mean, just absolute bottoming out of the program at that point. He comes in, he stabilizes things, gets them back to the NCAA tournament last year, was one of the only, I guess, SEC teams that hadn't been there in some time. And so that's a big accomplishment, I think, for them to be able to look up and be like, hey, we got this team to the NCAA tournament last year. We were 8-10 and all that, and that's fine. But the thing is, we know that's good enough right now based on the strength of the SEC. If you can just find a way to get to 8 conference wins, you should be okay based on, whatever you do in the non-conference portion. So I think this is a roster that when you compare it to all the others, yes, like you're probably going to be like, okay, can they really find their way to what may be that magic number of 8, which it wasn't last year. You have to get to 8 last year. It didn't take a lot. I wouldn't necessarily bank on the SEC being as dominant in the non-conference as they were a season ago. I just don't think that's going to happen again. You have to be able to get to, again, kind of looking at what may be the magic number. And I think when you just look at the roster they put together, Blue Cane's a guy that's been very, I think, crucial to kind of, again, sort of the way they've developed their program. I mean, Santos Cyril, this guy, he's a beast at 6'11", 260. And, he's coming into a year where I think he could be one of your top sort of breakout guys in the SEC. And then you look at, again, the guys they brought in as well. And so I think it is going to be one where Georgia probably will not have a lot of high expectations in the preseason, at least, from the outside. They will from the inside. But like you mentioned, that's exactly going to play into, I think, Mike White's hands here, because I do think there's clearly a path for them to get back to the NCAA tournament. And if he does that, if he gets them back to the tournament for a second straight year, like I said, if you put the whole thing in sort of the context of where the program was at when he took over several years ago, what an accomplishment that would be.
Yep, it certainly would be. And as we know with the SEC, there's just so much depth in there. Like when we're talking about Georgia being a bottom 4, bottom 5 team, that speaks exactly to it. And I don't know if they quite get as many teams in the NCAA tournament as they did last year. They were hovering right around 13 to 14 teams, and that would be just a Herculean feat. But I just take a look at things this year, and maybe they don't get like a full 13 to 14 teams in, but I just still keep taking a look at things, and I still keep thinking that they're going to get at the very minimum 11 teams in this year, just with the depth once again.
Yeah, and I think that's for me, and I feel like all summer I was downplaying the idea that they could replicate what they did last year, because I was, kind of using the argument that, look, they're not going to win some of those close games that they won in non-conference play last year. Like the law of averages will come back to meet them there, and they're going to lose some of those games this year. Can't see the type of dominance you saw where every single team had double-digit wins in non-conference play. I just don't think that's going to happen this year. But for one, two, we know that the ACC challenge is part of the equation. And I just think the ACC is going to be very improved based on some of the new coaches that are coming in there. And so you're probably going to lose a few more of those games. The SEC hasn't changed their scheduling formula. You got a lot of teams out there that are trying to schedule very tough. And so you're going to pick up losses somewhere. But as we've seen, that kind of is okay when you get into the long run, especially if your conference is as strong as you think it could be. The committee's still going to reward you for just the fact that you are scheduling these kind of things, and everyone, getting into the players tournament and all this, like that's by design. You want to make sure you're putting your team in a position. But I'm with you, Greg. It may not be 14 again, may have a few more teams left out, but I still think probably at the worst, you're looking at maybe 11, maybe it's more like 12. I don't know exactly how it shapes out, but I would be surprised if it's less than that, just because you've still got, coaches that went out, they spent their NIL resources wisely and put together some really good rosters here. And I think you're probably going to have, and look, I don't put a lot of stock into preseason top 25s or anything like that. You got to prove it on the court, but you probably are going to look at 6 to 7 teams that feel like they're, among the top 25 teams in the country starting this season.
Yep, I am right there with you. I think that it's going to be another great year for the SEC, and guess who gets an up close and front row seat to it? That'd be you, Blake. I know you're getting set for what is going to be an amazing college basketball season. You're doing a great job on the SEC front and really do a great job of covering all college basketball nationwide. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you. I know people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, always appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, you can find all of our SEC basketball stuff over at Southeastern 16 on YouTube, any podcast app you use there. We're getting ready to really jump into our season previews. Of course, we've been talking about it year round, so lots of stuff you can catch up on from the summer to get our thoughts on these teams as well. And plenty of coaches we've talked to, Chris Beard, Chris Jans, Lamont Paris, Justin Gainey at Tennessee. We've talked to a lot of people, so you can get, great insight straight from the sources themselves. So yeah, check us out, Southeastern 16 on YouTube, and everything else college basketball related. You can find me on Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell.
And Blake does such an incredible job taking a look at this amazing game of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, and he did so once again today. So big thanks to Blake for joining me on Cuz Soups, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Cuz Soups, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, whatever for this podcast, you have one of two ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. 3 conference previews remaining. We'll probably get Blake back aboard in a week or 2 for the SEC preview. Then we've got the Big East, we've got the Big Ten, and then it is the start of the college basketball season. So I appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.